For both betrayed and wayward spouses, how do you deal with the shame that comes upon you in the midst of recovery and has the temptation to keep you from ultimately healing in your journey? Welcome to the Affair Recovery Podcast, where we ask your questions to our expert therapists to help you get unstuck and move forward. My name is Jeremy, and I'm your host for today's episode 8. And we're going to be talking all about shame. Both what it is, what is the difference between guilt and shame. We're also going to be addressing how shame is experienced for both betrayed and wayward spouses, but how it's experienced differently, and how you can ultimately know if shame is keeping you back from healing and what to do if it is. Today, I'm joined by Rick Reynolds, the founder of Affair Recovery, and 3 incredible expert therapists, John Haney, Tracy Brock, and Lori Bryson. As always, be sure to hit subscribe and leave a comment and let us know what you think about the podcast or ask any questions that you have for our experts, and it might be featured on a future episode. And finally, if you have a question that you want to ask directly featured on the podcast, call the question line that we have, which is in the description of the podcast episode below. While we know that infidelity can be life-shattering, we also believe that you can get your life back. Well, guys, welcome back for another episode of our podcast. We're on episode 8 today. And Rick, you're coming back again from Ecuador. And so you're still there in Ecuador, sitting by the fire. You never left.
This week and next week still. I'm here for 3 weeks. And it's really actually one of my favorite things. I get to train therapists here in Ecuador on at a children's home on treating trauma. And to me, if you can build a fence at the top of the cliff so that people don't fall off, if you can treat children and help them heal from the trauma they've experienced, I think you can avoid a lot of the issues that we end up treating those of us around this table.
And speaking of some of the things that we bring from childhood into adulthood, today we're going to be talking all about shame. And that is a big topic in infidelity. And, somebody who's new to the space of infidelity might think, well, that must be a topic for the unfaithful spouse because of what they've done and they should be ashamed. But what we know, and we're going to talk about further, is there's actually a lot to be said about the shame that betrayed spouses feel and experience and have to work through as well. But before we get into listener questions and all the different things, I first just want to define shame for the purposes of this conversation so we kind of know what we're working with, and for somebody who's even entirely new to the idea of shame. So, Rick, would you talk about what shame is?
I initially look at it, maybe it's because I'm treating child therapists up here, training them, but I look at it as where we learn at a very early age to take responsibility for things that really aren't our responsibility and see ourselves as a failure and as worthless. And we're continually believing a lie about our identity. And then we spend the rest of our life trying to prove the things that, we ended up believing about ourselves, told ourselves, or someone else told us about ourselves, that that's true. And we have to hide that. And we don't know how to deal with it. And of course, with infidelity, for the wayward spouse, the problem with shame is it makes you 100% totally self-centered, and it blocks the ability to be empathetic and to help your mate heal. I think it's a little different for the betrayed spouse, but we'll probably get into that. I'll let somebody else pick that up.
To me, when we look at shame in a infidelity context, at least, I think one of the most unfortunate things about shame in this dynamic is that it tends to hijack our sense of who we are. I think for the unfaithful partner, Rick talks about that sense of unworthiness that, yes, very much develops in childhood and all of that. But it'll try to create this paradigm by we define ourselves by what we did kind of thing, and trying to get someone to see that they're not what they did. But for the betrayed partner, there's a kind of similar thing sometimes, because I think there's a very real set of shame that goes with both sides of this equation. But like for the betrayed partner, there's this kind of identity distortion that comes out of what was done to me kind of thing, where they allow how they see themselves to be impacted by what was done to them.
I think it's important to delineate between guilt and shame. And guilt is about what we do. And I think there is our conscience should ring a bell and say, hey, that was wrong. And it's a bad feeling about what I did. That's okay. That's based on truth. Shame is a feeling about who I am. And that's based on a lie. So there's a difference between saying, I told a lie, that's wrong, I need to correct that, whatever, versus I'm just a horrible liar. Because what horrible liars do, they lie. And it's defining ourselves by what we do. It's not just I do this, but now I am this. But I think sometimes, especially in the child development, like Rick was talking about, you can define yourself in a shameful way based on what someone else did. For me, it was kind of like if even my own dad doesn't want to spend any time with me, then there must be something wrong with who I am. And I think the other thing that I think about when I think about shame is it causes us to do two things. To hide. I like the little book written by a monk called John Powell called Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Am? And it's because deep down, I'm bad. And if you really knew, you'd reject me. And so it's a great little book that kind of exposes that lie. So we hide and we hurl. You know the best way to not feel shame? Blame. Hey, it's not me, it's you. And now I don't have to feel bad about me. And I think a lot of shame leads to the blame game, the accusation that we see that comes up, especially in infidelity.
Yeah, and even just to add on further that, like, even as we're saying, like even in recovery groups, they'll say, I'm not what I did. That's always a big recovery saying, but at the same time, they're having to take responsibility for what they did. It's not where we're just able to punt away what we did. And so, if I went to a recovery group, I'd say, hey, I'm John, I'm a cocaine addict, or I'm an alcoholic, whatever, but I'm not attaching my identity to that. And, but I think, for those of you trying to heal this and those of you who are feeling really bad about what you did, I think, taking that full responsibility while not trying to attach it to your sense of yourself is going to be critical for your partner's healing.
Because the feeling of guilt or shame is very, very close. But I think one of the big things is, where does it come from? And for me as a person of faith, guilt is your conscience. Guilt is the Holy Spirit convicting you. You want to look at that because there's going to be grace. There's going to be hope. Shame is a lie of the enemy trying to keep you trapped and down by you're just a bad person and there's no hope for you.
Well, obviously, we're going to spend the next 45 minutes talking about this. So why does shame sabotage people's recovery journey on both sides?
All of us have a concept of shame of what it is or what it isn't. When it comes specifically to infidelity, I think we'd all agree it's a whole different animal. It attacks, the core of our history, who we thought we were, who we thought we married, who we probably never wanted to be in the first place. We talked about the hiding. I think it takes a lot of courage. We talked about, the number one, denominator of shame is we're going to hide it. Because if I let you know this thing about what I've done or what's happened to me, you could reject me, you could judge me, you could just leave me. You might look at me the way I fear. And that's that lie that shame tells us. But the remedy, even as we're sitting around this table talking about infidelity, is just this. It's the courage to bring it into the light. A little bit of light always exposes darkness. And the more we have the courage to just even listen to this or begin to speak about our experiences, particularly with infidelity, right? Because that's just, again, we don't want to talk about that. There's subjects out there we just don't want to touch. We don't want anyone to know.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think shame and secrecy are highly correlated. And, another recovery saying is you're only as sick as your secrets. And that the things that to answer your question, just like I think Lori did beautifully, it's shame keeps us from putting it into the light where the solution lies.
Shame also prevents us from receiving. Because if I really feel like I'm such a bad person and you actually want to love me, show me grace, I don't know what to do with that. I know what to do with judgment, condemnation, put downs because I feel like I deserve that. I was working with a couple one time and we were talking about their needs and I just remember this woman kind of talking about how he wouldn't ever tell her that she was beautiful or that he loved her or whatever. And he got to a place of real authenticity, kind of emotional, and was sharing that he really did love her. And it shocked me. She looked away. She wouldn't look at him. That's a sign shame is activating. We look down. We rub our face. We hit our forehead, whatever. She looked down and she instantly went, well, but I did this. She started deflecting it. And I said, hold on, he's fine. He's really giving you what you've been saying you want. She couldn't receive it because she didn't feel like she deserved it.
We're dealing with the fever. You've got to get to the infection. And the infection is, to me, just not seeing who you are. If you're created in the imago Dei, in the image of God, you have immense worth, immense value. You're born with all the self-esteem you'll ever need. It's an on-off switch. The problem with shame is we somehow believe that our worth or our value is defined, again, by actions, by what people say, what we tell ourselves. And in reality, the real issue is we don't understand our worthiness, and we don't treat ourselves that way.
And by the way, I would say this to a betrayed partner too, kind of to Rick's point, if any one of us is going to be defined by the worst thing we've ever did, and that's why I don't like once a cheater, always a cheater. I mean, I remember as a kid, I stole some candy from a friend's house, so by that logic, once a thief, always a thief. I mean, and shame's going to try to forever define us by that kind of thing, and it doesn't allow us to see who we really are.
I can't believe you stole candy, John.
Oh, yeah.
I wondered where my candy was.
I bet it was a Twinkie.
No, it's those really high quality, like conversation hearts at Valentine's Day.
High quality, yeah.
High quality. John does
shelf,
go for high quality
Top
candy.
shelf sugar.
I got a buddy of mine who always has like just a whole spread of candy in his middle console of his truck. And you would never know, but you get in the car with him and he just opens it and says, you want anything?
Better not be chocolate in Austin during the summer.
No, not chocolate, not chocolate. I love what you guys said so much about shame and how, we're all carrying shame with us to some degree, even without infidelity. And when this kind of crisis happens, I mean, we've talked about attachment rupture, like your attachment rupture with your spouse is ripped apart. That's going to mess with your identity. And then shame is going to get in there. I mean, what just a mess when you think about what's going on in our hearts and our minds and our souls and how shame can get in there and wreak havoc over our recovery process. And so, we have a lot of questions. I want to play one of these from one unfaithful male who sent his question in.
Hi, team. Thanks for reviewing my question here. So I'm an unfaithful spouse, and I was caught. And now I find myself caught up in a situation where when I'm talking to my spouse, she just gets so irate. I mean, she goes off. She calls me names. She verbally beats me up. And I just have to sit there in my shame, and I have to take it. And I do my best to listen and have a soft heart. But sometimes she's so angry, and I just come out of my box, and I just try to defend myself and protect myself. Now, in our situation, we're about 2 years down the road from D-Day, and I've done a ton of work, and I'm making a lot of progress towards healing. And one thing about healing was I recently read your article about anger and how to react in a positive way, and it was great because it talked about, dealing with a partner's verbal onslaught, and I arrived at a question. In the name of rebuilding, how long should one just sit there and remain on the receiving end of the spouse's anger and name calling?
I think a natural reaction is, again, to hide it, to bury it, get it off of me. Men, women, men, I think typically, you get pissed off or shut down. Women, we don't typically get pissed off as much with shame. I think we can go into overfunctioning, performing, pretending I'm going to take care of everyone, and then we all want to shut down. But what I hear in this question, and it's just so painful, is if we're going to look at shame, it's I want it off of me. And so maybe, the person that strayed, right, you're bringing in incredible shame to the relationship by what you've done. You've given the message that this relationship didn't matter. Maybe I didn't care. We didn't have the ingredients there, to be honest. And so, the betrayed partner, it just sounds like in that transmitting of the shame, it's get it off of me. I want, to react. There could be trauma at play, especially, longer with enough anger and retaliation and name calling. And so I wanted to say, yeah, shame is evident. It's transmitting of shame. And then how long do you want to take in messages of shame? I think for everybody individually, it's the beginning of, I am not what I've done. I know who I am. Even if people and even my mate are in a place of pain and they disagree. I mean, all of us even here to this comment, comments that come at us, they're hurled. And it's like, oh, how do we begin to care, but really have a filter to say, I can show remorse. I know what I've done. Even any of us sitting here in this room today, people may disagree with us. They may, again, want to say some pretty horrific things, and they might, we're striking their pain. We're striking all of our pain. So I just want to say with humility, it hurts. But I know for me, when I've been in places of my deepest shame and my deepest pain, I mean, the first thing I want to do, and, we hear the story in even the New Testament, I want to pick up a rock and I want to throw it. And I kind of want to act out. So how long do you put up with that? I'm not God. I can't tell anyone how to do that. But there does come a point where we all have to kind of cross the threshold of I know who I am. I know what maybe is being said towards me, isn't the truth. It's someone acting out of their own pain and then probably shame.
We can understand that it's just a lot of pain and trauma that's coming out of his spouse in an angry way, but also in such a shaming way, it sounds like, a berating. And that's definitely not the healthiest way to deal with her pain. I think when we talk about a situation like this, we also have to talk about not only the shame, but we have a very high value for mutual respect. And so there's a part where I go, how long do you take the shaming behavior? That's not good for the marriage, because it's not allowing respect. It's allowing your spouse to be her worst self in that moment. And so I think for this listener to say, you first kind of have to say, this is more about her reaction, is more about her. This is revealing, as we say, what is in her, than it is about what you did, even though it was very wrong and it hurt her so much. And I would say to work on how to have healthy boundaries that says, I really want to hear your pain. I want to empathize with you. I want to care for what I've done to you. And I want us to move forward. And we need to have some boundaries of respect. So when we can talk, I've actually done this in my own situation. When we can talk about this with mutual respect, I'm more than happy to talk about it. And I want to understand what you're experiencing and I want to care. But I will not be part of a conversation where respect is totally thrown out the window, because that's not good for either of us. So I don't agree that he should just continue to take this and then to let it crater him into more of his shame instead of seeing what's really going on here.
I want to add something here because this is complicated. From the perspective, you need to have a good enough functional boundary where you don't let it in. If you really understand who you are, that's huge. But the issue is, if somebody's being hijacked by their trauma, and we're now dealing with a trauma response, not a person response, I think how I respond is differently. So if all I'm doing is, if I say, like in week 10 or at 3 months, if you talk to me like that, if you shame me, I'm going to walk out. Now, the problem is, at that point, I think the person may be working really hard at not shaming, but they have to do their individual work to deal with the part of them that's that activated piece of them. And as long as they can own it and take responsibility for it, but that is individual work. And I have never had somebody who does this sort of behavior that you're describing, and especially for 2 years, that behavior wasn't modeled for them as a child, or somebody didn't treat them shamelessly in the same way they're treating you shamelessly. That is a sure sign of developmental trauma. And there's something going on there that's much deeper. And you can say to them, I hear you, but the fact is, that's not who I am. It's what I did, but it's not who I am.
And you brought out a key point. 2 years. He said this has been going on 2 years. That's a sign this thing is not getting to the deeper issues. And I think you gain self-respect and get out of shame by having boundaries that say, I don't allow anybody to talk to me like that. Maybe in those first few months when everything's so, like you said, you kind of have to have some room for people to just vent and try to get their bearings again and get into recovery and get working on their own stuff. But 2 years is a long time for that to keep going on. Not okay.
Yeah, and for the gentleman who asked this question, I want to validate to him the good work that he's doing and really trying to look at himself. That's a very courageous thing to do, and kind of just standing on the shoulders of all my colleagues here. I just wouldn't want you to let your identity be hijacked by her words. And but I couldn't agree more around that. Like at some point, this is a kind of our own trauma response, revealing things that happened to us a long time ago in many cases. But even there, kind of, and I'm speaking now as a man who has betrayed myself, that like there's an opportunity in that for your wife, because I think this forced some things into the light for me in terms of my own personality dynamics, some of my own, past trauma that I never would have even recognized at all, let alone as trauma. I was forced to kind of look at some of these things that I never would have before. So there's a weird kind of opportunity that comes in this for us to actually get to engage some things that we might not have otherwise. But yeah, I think at 2 years, if something's still, where we're just having this kind of just really amygdala kind of response to it, something deeper is going on.
I also want to say that this is where things like harboring hope are absolutely crucial in individual therapy, because in their mind, especially if this is what was modeled, this is all going to make sense. It's not until you get in a healthy community where you're embedded with others dealing with this that you begin to see what health is. So I can understand if that's all you've known, that's all you're going to do. And it's imperative that people get in healthy community to begin to heal and to learn how to be different.
There's a big difference between feeling better and getting better. And I agree. I mean, I shudder to think of the things that I have said and done in my pain and my shame. And I think the idea is, I just want to feel better. I mean, hurling insults, calling names, rolling around on the floor. I think I'm going to feel better, but that's always what I've done. That's my remedy until it's not. And so that idea of, really some clarity that does come, as crappy as all this infidelity and recovery is, clarity does start to come to say, where is the shame? Where is the trauma? What's my stuff? What's your stuff? And kind of go.
And just showing up with authenticity, with compassion. And so when in one of the things I would say to the person who wrote this is you want to be able to be authentic and compassionate and humble. And those are all the true self. That's all of who you truly are. And you're not what she says. You are you're someone with immense dignity and worth. And you need to be able to communicate the same to your mate about you and about them, because they don't understand who they are either.
I want to put a plug in for a little tool that I use a lot that's been helpful. It's called nonviolent communication. Because when you're just spewing out of your pain in a trauma response, it's kind of a violent communication. It's very shaming, very blaming. And in nonviolent communication, you don't mince what was done, but you share vulnerably the impact it's having on you. Then there's hope of us hearing each other. And you can even share what it is you're what you need or you want from the other person. And it's kind of the opposite of what is being experienced in this scenario. And so that's what I would say is, a good therapist would help you be able to communicate, be able to get to the vulnerable pain that she's feeling or whatever is going on there, the fear, without it being such violent communication that is destroying the marriage.
There was a quote that one of our coworkers sent that just, as y'all were talking, it made me think of it. This was just last week and it just felt very timely. She said, when you drink water from a cup, it becomes part of you. When water falls on you like rain, it evaporates a few minutes later. Similarly, thoughts can be consumed or dismissed. Is this thought nourishing? Is this feeling something you should drink? Or is it more like getting caught in the rain? You'll always feel the rain, but you don't have to drink the rain. And I just thought that was a good way to think about that too, because whether this person is standing, getting hurled insults at, or it's just everyday life that the rain is going to come, it doesn't mean you necessarily have to consume it.
That's right. And when there's not infidelity, I like the phrase, this is probably more about you right now than it is about me. The way that you're communicating, the way that you're spewing. That's really hard, though, in infidelity when you've been the unfaithful, to be able to say, well, your reaction right now is probably more about you than it is about me. But some of that is true, because not every betrayed spouse communicates in that exact fashion, or at least for 2 years.
I'd like to flip the equation around to the shame that betrayed spouses experience. And I want to do it with a comment that I came across on our social media. And the comment said, "This video is on point, but I feel devastated and stuck. I am so ashamed that I was not man enough for my spouse. I have suffered for months now because of my shame, including losing my job. I believe my friends and family see me as a failure for continuing in the marriage and trying to heal. I frequently hear, get over it or get out."
And I can relate so heavily to that, not just personally, but like in so many of the people I've seen. And I've got to say, like for a betrayed partner, that's one aspect of how the shame kind of sticks to us if we let it. That, and I think I've said multiple times in the Harboring Hope course that it feels like as a betrayed man particularly, but it can, very much for a betrayed woman, that like we're the ones wearing the scarlet letter, that we're the ones that have the big loser L on our forehead and sometimes our partner, in justifying what they did, is actually doubling down on that, saying you weren't enough, which isn't true. You don't want to take that as truth, but I want to say to this gentleman that I've worked with celebrities who are going through this, work with, professional athletes who are going through this, all the way down to high school kids who are experiencing their first heartbreak. Everybody, man, woman, age, socioeconomic status, it doesn't matter. At some level, I think all of us feel that way. It's like, what was wrong with me? Why wasn't I enough? And by the way, for men particularly, society doubles down on that myth. If you're man enough, you'll keep your woman happy, and a happily married woman won't do this. When, the problem with that kind of thinking, well, there's lots of problems with that kind of thinking, but we sometimes say the paradigm that in your case, women don't cheat because of something wrong with you. They cheat because of something that's fundamentally wrong with how they see themselves or God or their, the problems in their lives or the unresolved trauma that Rick was talking about. But it feels so personal, but I just can't stress enough that it wasn't about you not being enough. And I could talk for 2 hours on that, but
it's even more than that. I think it's not that you weren't man enough, because I know that's the narrative you're telling yourself or you're being told. But the reality is you were more man than they could handle. And in many ways, people always affair down, and they didn't know how to deal authentically with who you were and how to show up. So it's not that you weren't enough. I think that you have to be careful about the thing you tell yourself, being able to see ourselves again rightly, that you're an amazing person. You're not the one who went out and betrayed your commitment. So that actually says a lot about your character and your integrity.
Confidentiality is crucial to us, obviously, but I wish we could do these pictures of here's the marital partner, here's the affair partner, here's what's going on with the marital partner, here's what's going on with the affair partner. And I couldn't agree more with that afffaring down kind of thing, that and yes, some cases the person was younger, maybe they had tighter abs, whatever, but qualitatively there's this idea, and I think this particularly works with women, that women tend to act out at the level of their shame or their own inadequacy. They go dumpster diving sometimes looking for somebody they feel kind of meets them on that level of unworthiness. And so I think it's exactly right that it's not, that I wasn't good enough for them, whether they can have gotten to the point in their recovery where they can acknowledge it yet or not. They didn't somehow feel good enough for me or for marriage or for God or for goodness or for whatever. It's but I could not agree with that more.
For all of us in our stories, it's close to home for you and it's close to home for me. And it is that lie, I'm not man enough. Gosh, when we're talking about shame, and again, the culture gets it wrong, because the message to men is don't be weak. Yet this isn't weakness at all. This was, like you said, this was about, your wife, or, years ago, in my case, me, searching for something to remedy my shame. And the level of acting out is always going to match how much shame we still have internally, right? I've got to find a remedy for that. And often I don't want to look for that in my marriage because my marriage is maybe safe. I mean, I've gotten disillusioned in that, but I hate the message in general. I can get really ramped up in a hurry about the messages, the culture that we give to men. And I think I am not a biologist or a genealogist, but I want to say I think our DNA is over 99% the same. I mean, it is that one little, chromosome, and not even to get political, but I think our DNA across genders, male, it's over 99% the same. And so just this idea that we get stereotyped into, something's wrong with you or you're not man enough, I can get really ramped up about that stuff.
And I wish you guys could be the fly on the wall in our offices, or those of you who haven't been to an EMS, and look around and see the other men and women this has happened to, some of the most kind, beautiful, handsome, amazing, loyal, hardworking, great parent kind of people, and this happens to them. And so you're already going through one of the most ego destroying kind of which has a good side to it too, which is another topic, but this devastating kind of pain, that, and then to have to double down on that and be told that you weren't enough and have society and these myths that somehow you weren't man or woman enough to keep your partner happy. Yeah, I get very passionate about that, but that's one of the reasons why I like this community aspect of this so much, is when we can start looking beyond, because we're talking about shame, the shame that I'm experiencing as a betrayed partner, and kind of see that it really wasn't about me by seeing these other incredible people who are going on the same journey.
And we see this with male or female. It's amazing to me how much we personalize the other person's behavior. And one of the things I do with a couple when they're stuck is I'll just say, so at this point of your recovery, what are you most afraid of? And then whatever they say, and if that happened, what would it mean? And if that happened, what would it mean? And we dig down to where, and it just blows me away every time, the betrayed spouse will come back with something like, well, if they cheated again or whatever they're afraid of, it would mean I really am not enough. It would mean I really am a failure. And so then I go to, tell me the first time in your life that you felt like a failure, like you weren't enough. And there's always a story. And they carry that within them, that somehow I'm not enough of a man, or I'm not worth choosing, or I can't get anything right, just like my dad said. And so the infidelity is drilling down. So that's that rooted part that makes them take that behavior so personally. And you can try to logic them out of that all you want. But that's shame, and shame is not logical, and it's not going to be healed logically. We could say all day long, dude, you are man enough. That's deep feeling of shame that somehow I wasn't man enough has got to be gotten to differently, and that's usually some good deep root work, maybe some trauma work.
How would y'all describe, just broadly, because we've kind of honed in on the betrayed male side of this a little bit too, but how would you just describe broadly the shame that betrayed spouses feel?
Well, I can just tell you this. When I was in my first marriage, gosh, this is so many years ago, it takes me a while to think about it. I remember being in a large women's ministry meeting at our church, and everybody seemed to have it together. Everybody seemed to have good marriages. Everybody seemed to be. I remember running out of the room to the bathroom, finding a stall and crying because I felt so horrendously ashamed about my marriage and myself. And nobody knew what I was going through, but it just hits on all that lesser than, and it creates a loneliness, a division between you and other people. And you have friends you talk to or family members. They don't know what, they've not been through it. And some of them say good things, some say the stupidest things, but you're in a different camp than anybody else because your spouse has been unfaithful to you, and you don't even know why you're in this trauma. You don't know. I didn't know it was trauma. I didn't know why I was feeling and acting the way I was.
And I think I would define it as an identity apocalypse. I mean, it deconstructs everything. I mean, and going back to what I was kind of alluding to a moment ago, there are good aspects of that, because sometimes it can bring out the false aspects of our personality, the ego that we're trying to show the world and all of that. And we can get a more authentic us that comes out of us. But while we're sitting in the wreckage, it's to me the most complicated form of pain that I know of, that I've experienced. I mean, we could talk about therapeutic situations that can rival that, but it is just an absolute, cataclysm.
And I think that we feel like a failure in that moment. And part of the problem is, in some way, the shame that the betrayed spouse is feeling is not dissimilar to the one that the wayward spouse is feeling. Both feel like they have compromised themselves. Both feel that there's something wrong with them. For the betrayed spouse, because they're still with somebody after they swore they wouldn't ever be with somebody who treated them like that. And now they're working on the relationship. For the wayward spouse, because they told themselves they would never be like their dad or their mom who cheated or whatever. And now they feel like a failure. So everybody's feeling like a failure because they've now been, I think you said the word hurled earlier, Tracy. They've been hurled into this situation where this wasn't supposed to be their life, and they believe it's a reflection on their identity, when in reality, the true reflection on the identity isn't the fact that failures occurred, it's how you respond to the failure.
Rick, you talk a lot about, I've heard you speak on before, the dishonor side of it.
Yes,
that the betrayed
absolutely.
spouse feels. Can you talk about that just a little bit more?
I'd love to. Thank you, Jeremy. That's a great lead-in, man. Well, to me, in honor shame cultures, so North America, Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, those cultures are postmodernism, individualism. So we don't understand honor shame, but the vast people groups of the world actually operate. They're motivated to perform for different reasons. For instance, the reason a Japanese child will work really hard at doing well in school isn't to somehow accomplish and to feel good about themselves. They'll do it because they don't want to dishonor their family. So there's this natural feeling that if there's something terrible if you are dishonored or if you dishonor someone else. Think about a Japanese soldier in World War II. If he brought dishonor to Japan, how did he restore that honor? He would have to kill himself. And so in a sense, the betrayed spouse did nothing wrong, but it feels dishonorable. They feel that honor shame thing. The social credit score, the good feeling you had about your life and about who you were as a couple, that social credit score, the good opinion that others hold you in, suddenly has been shattered, and that credit score has dropped. And now you feel like a fraud, especially if other people don't know. You go places and it feels like, man, if they only knew, because your value and your worth, again, it feels dishonorable to be with somebody who's dishonored you. It feels far more natural to want to kill the person who dishonored you than to stay with the person who dishonored you. And so it just creates an internal conflict, and you feel like there's something wrong with you, when in reality, there's something pretty amazing about you, that you're still standing and you're still breathing and you're still willing, to grow and to see what's on the other side of this thing.
That social credit score is kind of what you just described, Tracy, about the church event when y'all were in the middle of it and going into the back. I mean, that's exactly it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and especially when it feels like nobody knows, the dishonor that's existing there and hiding in the dark, the shame that's hiding in the dark with that.
And I think we have stereotypes of the type of person that would be unfaithful, but we also have stereotypes about the person that was betrayed, and culturally. And we have to let go of those. And that's why I really appreciate people like Lisa Turkhurst and different ones that have come out about their story. And you go, she's amazing. And yet she went through this as a betrayed spouse. And it kind of helps reintegrate your view of what a betrayed person, who they might be, and see them as worth. So maybe you can see yourself as worth, faults and all.
We had another question that was written in, and it's a little bit of a different sense in terms of what happens when an unfaithful spouse does not deal with the shame that they carry. And the question says this, it's from the betrayed wife. She says, "We are still together, but I sense he has never recovered from the shame of his cheating. He has erased himself and is now a yes man, whatever I want, like a servant. He struggles with eye contact, is completely emotionally unavailable, does not share his thoughts or opinions or seem to have a sense of purpose for our marriage and family. Ultimate nice guy, like a caricature, like there's nothing to bond to. When we talk, he struggles to guess what I want to hear, and I have no idea what he's really thinking. He's repented. He no longer flirts. He doesn't court other women's attention. And I've done a lot of healing, and I have a lot of peace with the affair. But how do I go on in this marriage now where it feels like we're roommates? It's genuinely painful."
He doesn't sense how he's impacting her. I mean, I feel terrible for this person. And he so shamefully doesn't feel like it's even worth being real. I mean, typically if I have someone that's in this state, I send them off to some sort of intensive treatment program so they can learn to be authentic. But I think you need to do a massive intervention so that they begin to take a deep dive into the developmental trauma that's creating that sense of worthlessness within them so that they can show up authentically and be a real person.
And I think we keep talking about that, of just the courage of shame, and the courage to get past shame is really like, this is who I am, warts and all. I'm not what I've done. It's just, I am. Pride's not going to get us there. Shame's not going to get us there. That realization that, there's nothing I can keep doing to make me, matter any more than I already do and be accepted. And there's nothing I have to do to add on that. Like, that idea of stopping the insanity of, I should be, this is it. And so I feel an incredible sadness. However, gratitude of the ability of this listener to write in and say, forgiveness isn't enough. I want ultimately a relationship with a real person that's genuine. I want to be able to talk about this. No one wants just a yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. It's I want to know the real you. And courage in some ways for recognizing like this is probably shame. And then what we keep talking about is the realization that shame, even though it might be, I'm pleasing to you, I'm giving you everything you want, I'm telling you everything you want to hear, that never gets us there.
I would love to know more about the situation. What type of recovery? Did they do therapy with a therapist? Did they come to an EMS weekend? If they haven't, one of my thoughts would be coming to an EMS weekend, even though she feels like she's so much better with the infidelity, but that's where he would be treated with respect and given the opportunity to do anything that maybe he hadn't done to help bring repair to what his actions did, but really beginning to see things a little differently. And then I just got to say, this is a type of situation that I'm like, I would love to work with this couple. I would love to work with this man because you've got to go deeper. This goes down to attachment style and how he learned to be in the world at a very young age. Tell me his story. Tell me where he learned it's better just to keep it all hidden and say what they expect you to say. And then that was lonely, and so it felt good to get attention from other women. And then, that hurt my wife, so now I've got to shut that down, and just shutting down more and more. So, to the listener, I'd say maybe look at what's been done, and not so much from the standpoint of I'm still carrying so much hurt from the infidelity, but our marriage is not a genuine intimacy. So a good marriage therapist, maybe looking into some of the stuff that AR has for the help of the marriage.
Yeah, this one makes me sad for both of you because it sounds like, it sounds like he doubled down on the shame and just descended into even a more constructed version of the false self, that I'm just going to be the good boy that always pleases and never lets anybody down and doesn't disappoint anybody. And I love what you said, because to me, then, to pull that off, then it creates this kind of passivity where there's no real engagement. And and love is about engagement. It's about knowing and being known and all these kinds of things. And I think if we're doing this process right on both sides, it's going to be an elevation of the true self. It's not going to be a further descent into the false self.
I just imagine a situation where he could actually be authentic about, say, something he didn't like. And her response being one of care and understanding, and him saying, oh, just, kind of like a little mouse coming out of the hole. It's okay. It's safe to be me. It's safe. Messy. Marriage is messy, but it's worth it. And on the other side of differences and conflict and sometimes difficult communication is some of the best intimacy of feeling, oh, I can be known and still loved. And that's what I would so long for them to both experience.
And it is in community, that healthy community, by the way, that we're able to see ourselves differently as we see ourselves through the eyes of others, not necessarily our mate, but if he's in a group of other healthy men who can model for him authenticity and who can model how to love and who can model their own sense of worth, that's where people begin to pick up new understanding and new behaviors and new concepts of who they really are. It's that community. And Hope for Healing, by the way, is excellent for that.
And I'll just say this last thing. Sometimes, people just think avoidance and peacekeeping is the way to go. And when I talk to someone in there describing, say, their parents' marriage, oh, they had a great marriage. They never fought. They never argued. I'm like, so you're telling me your parents had a terrible marriage? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, yeah, you are. Because they didn't know each other. And maybe some of it was behind closed doors. But if you say, well, we've never fought, that is not good. Not that we want to fight. We want to know how to communicate even difficult subjects. But why? What is the whole purpose of all this? So that I can find that what's longing of my heart is to be known and loved for who I really, really am. And that you could feel known and loved. We have to be authentic, to know each other, to be known. Why? For deeply caring involvement. And it is messy, but man, it's worth it. There's nothing like it.
We did a video a couple months ago with a success story. Her name was Amber. It's on our YouTube channel. And she talked about how they were EMS weekend alum. And she talked about when she looks back on what she did, she was the unfaithful. She says she doesn't feel shame, but she feels this deep remorse. And she says the longer time goes, the more the remorse increases, but the shame doesn't necessarily take hold. What does it look like to move from shame to remorse in that way?
We say that the question of why after infidelity is so huge. And it's usually the betrayed spouse that's screaming why this happened. And we say that is really the work of the unfaithful. But if the unfaithful really starts digging deep with maybe taking some good help to do that, where did this come from in me? Okay, yeah, I can look at the marriage situation or this situation, but what was it in me that gave myself permission? What is this telling me about me? That can take you to a very deep place where you can regret or feel remorse about what you did, but you're no longer carrying this lie of shame that it means I was a bad person. Sometimes I jokingly say the goal of marriage therapy is pretty simple. I want you to get to a place where you just go, well, no wonder. Because now that makes sense and now we can move forward. So sometimes getting from shame to remorse is that, well, no wonder. I see where that came from in me and I want to work on that and change that. But I am lovable and I didn't have to do that or whatever it is. And you're no longer carrying that lie that I did this because I'm just an unworthy, horrible piece of crap.
Once again, disentangling identity from it, but bringing that kind of compassion into it too. You know, sometimes it's one of the things that's sad for me when I'm watching a man or a woman who's been on the wayward side, just beating the crap out of themselves is, you know, I look at these people and they're caring people. And if their son or daughter had done the same thing, they would have come alongside of them. They would have tried to help them to understand where this came from, but they can't. And so often apply that same kind of compassion to themselves. And I think sometimes just owning that we're human, we're imperfect and everything. And it's, I kind of like that shift that's happening in the trauma world right now in that, it's not looking so much of what's wrong with me, but like that what happened to me kind of I question instead that this didn't happen in a vacuum. And if we can sensitively kind of step back and say, look, let's look at my wound history and everything and why I was susceptible here. We can actually come along ourselves where we're not just immediately going into that critical judgment, where it's more of a compassionate kind of understanding. And once we make that leap, then we can actually be sad for just grieve the hurt that we've done ourselves, not just the hurt we've done to our partner, but like we can really get to a place of genuine healing across the board.
It reminds me of a couple, and he had so much shame, but he avoided it so much by not taking ownership, not looking at things. And just through a series of things in the recovery, when he really saw what he had done and the impact, he was just so shame-based. And he said to her, I was such a worm. I can't believe I did this. How could you ever forgive me? And she looked at him and she said, because you're worth it. And he said, I've waited my whole life to hear those words. And then he had done some work and he just said, the only thing that helps me a little bit, and he said it with tears, is, who does that to a little boy?
Two pragmatic things as someone who, gosh, I think, Rick, you would agree, for those of us that have strayed, we could be poster children for shame. But I think two things that I know I've found and I see in others, pragmatic ways to see the shift from shame to more remorse, is just what we're talking about. This idea of bringing it to the light and having the courage, just like Amber, to begin to put words instead of hiding. The more words I can find of just being able to speak to what I've done and not crawl in a hole. Scales don't come on me and, I'm not hurled with rocks. And then the other thing that can happen is, we don't ever have to pretend. I don't ever have to even professionally or personally sit here and pretend that I know what it's like to be betrayed. But I know the idea that when we move out of shame, I can just sit and I can start, and I've been amazed by this, to have a tremendous capacity just to believe you and go, wow, I can just sit with you. I don't have to pretend I know exactly what it's like. But if I stay in that place of shame, I'm still going to avoid it. I'm still going to make it about me. And so the second pragmatic way that you're in a place of remorse is, thank God, it doesn't have to be about me. And things can just simply hurt my feelings. They're not just going to send me reeling back into the abyss of, woe is me. And so I love that it's a really good marker to say, yeah, you've got to deal with the shame as an unfaithful, so you can truly start to be empathetic and be there for people. And over time, I think we all around this table would say, you really get to a place where you can just honor the pain of betrayed and unfaithful. It's like a really horrible game of would you rather. Remember that kids game? Like, would you rather, never brush your teeth again or never be able to shower? Would you rather, have to eat snakes or, go crawl and eat dirt? Well, neither. And I think that's the place with shame even today. Like, the answer is neither. Would you ever really want your life ripped out of you to be betrayed and have that, destruction? No. But would you ever want to have to be a person that has to really see what they've done and know they can't take it back and change it, but only they can take responsibility and ownership? Yeah, I think hopefully you can get to a place of the point of that game is I don't want either one of them.
Which what you're saying is, I think, though, the very reason why so many people get to such an intimate place after this, because, letting other people into our wounds, particularly the person who's closest to us, we're letting them into a place that maybe no one else, maybe their therapist, or they maybe never had a therapist, ever went. And so, and that feeling of being fully known can't happen unless we really have gone into the dark crevices of ourself and everything. But there's something so beautiful about that, like, talk about that antidote to shame of putting things into the light, that once I get to experience that this person knows the worst I can do and are still choosing me, there's a security in that, and there's a safety in that we can't ever experience in that hidden stage where we're just showing what we think people want to live. I just work with so many men and women who, in high positions of of their jobs and things like that, and they live in an absolute terror of being outed for the frauds they think they are, and that's no way to live. To just be able to. And I don't open up everything with a stranger on an airplane sitting next to me. I don't start talking about my formative shame or anything. No, and they don't want to hear it either. But but I think when we have, marriage, it's like, this is the opportunity here. And I think one of the ways we know we're starting to get out of that is where both parties can start having compassion for the journey that got the other to that place. Even, like the most wounded, betrayed partner, when they can actually start having compassion for that wounded little boy or little girl from a long time ago that kind of set some of this in motion, there's something incredibly beautiful and healing about all of that. So I love what you were saying.
The only thing that really heals shame is grace. And grace is that you are worth more than what you did. You are worth loving in spite of what you did. And we all need grace. Whether you're the betrayed, the unfaithful, or you've never had infidelity, we all are human. We all need grace. Actually, shame drives addiction. And the more you try to shame yourself to not do it again, the more you're going to do it. And the only thing that really sets you free out of that horrible cycle is grace, which is who you truly are in spite of what you've done. I think Rollo May has a book about addiction, Grace and Addiction. And
that's Gerald May, I think.
Gerald May.
Yeah.
Who's Rollo May? He's another one.
Yeah,
isn't
he's
he?
an existential therapist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. Keep me straight. Keep me and my people straight.
Rolos and candy.
Yeah, that's where I'm
kind of getting hungry now.
With my little Valentine hearts.
I think one of the things that allows space for grace to come back around to where we started is bringing it into the light. Like, I think when we can bring something out into the light, it creates an opportunity for us to receive grace. When you think you're going to get shamed and the stone's going to get thrown at you or whatever it might be, and then you receive grace instead, I mean, it heals some of those shame things that are going on inside of you. So I want to wrap up the way we always do and just invite God into this, especially with what you just said, Tracy. But Rick, you're way up in Ecuador. You're closer to God than we are elevation-wise.
I'm way down in Ecuador, just up high.
Oh, well, we're rotating right now. It's all confusing, but you go ahead and pray.
Oh, Lord, the thing I would ask is allow us to see ourselves as you see us. Allow us to see ourselves rightly and not to believe the lies that have been told us, but let us heal and be able to stand up straight and not bent over and be people who bring love and curiosity and kindness and compassion and healing to the world, Lord. Just help us to become functional. I just ask that in your name, Jesus. Amen.
What an incredible discussion. I know for me, I personally pulled a lot from it, just sitting there and talking all about shame and what we do with shame. And one of the things that I've personally come to know is that shame really thrives and lives in the dark. And the way we most combat shame is by bringing it into the light with other people. And that's why all of our courses at A Fair Recovery are designed the way they are. They're designed to be gone through anonymously, but with other people, so that you can bring the shame into the light and it can stop growing in the dark and you can finally deal with it. That's our hope for you. And so I just want to encourage you, go to afairrecovery.com and explore our courses and see what course might be the right fit for you. And if you have questions about the courses, just schedule an intake call with one of our team members, a survivor themselves of infidelity, and we would love to talk to you. On our next episode, it's going to be a little unique, and I'm excited for you to get to listen to it and watch it. Until then, to healing.